thanks for listening to the podcast. Today is a special episode with my friend Alberto Chapa, who is the head of distribution at Ableton. Ableton asked me to take over their headquarters in LA to do a weekend retreat, and you might have heard that podcast episode announcing it in October. The retreat happened. All the YouTube videos from the different workshops at the retreat from some incredibly talented, brilliant producers and educators is on YouTube. So visit the link in the show notes if you want to watch and binge all that sick content. There's a lot of good stuff on mixing, mastering, advanced sound design, just production concepts in general, different workflows and hacks using live. So check out those links in the show notes of this episode. And here's a fun recap with like entertaining stories, just talking about the event with Alberto. So yeah, a lot of fun stories in this one.
It was good. It was frustrating. Just had to find that key. I had to hunt it down. If you remember the bathroom situation here.
Yeah, dude, that was fun. We did the event and the bathroom struggles weren't too bad. We had like a door stopper for the bathroom, but it kept getting like broken or falling off. And then people would be like having to pee in the middle of presentations and then trying to figure it out. It was fine. It was still fun. Dude, thank you for having me for the Pasadena event at Ableton's headquarters in LA. That was so fun. Honestly, kind of feels like a dream. I was pretty sleep deprived going into it, so the whole thing was kind of a blur now looking back, but it was so fun, and like the energy in the room was incredible. And I love what Ableton has done with expanding the headquarters. You guys have way more space now than last time I was there in 2020. Yeah, it was a vibe, man. Thank you for asking me to take over the headquarters space to do a weekend retreat.
It was great. Thank you for designing an amazingly stacked curriculum and creating a really great experience for everybody, us included, at the Ableton office. And I wanted to take the opportunity to not only thank you, but sort of flip the tables a little bit and use this conversation to explore how you felt throughout the process a little bit, because you were doing so much. You had a lot going on. You had 18 guests. You had 8 presenters. You were being a gracious host. You had after parties. You had sponsors. It was a lot. And it was really cool watching you pull it off too. Thanks, very
man.
cool.
Yeah, a lot of coffee, a lot of Magic Mind. Shout out to a lot of nootropics and caffeine. But we did it. It was fun. It was a great time. You made the whole thing super easy from start to finish, with the exception of bailing on me once for lunch to go help an old lady with her Wi-Fi. That was hilarious. That's like, I feel like there's so many stories in a short period of time.
Yeah, that's what I think would be awesome to talk about a little bit, is all of the stories, because it was so compacted with just interesting interactions, interesting people, lessons learned, and then all of these side adventures and stories that just became inside jokes running throughout the weekend that I felt like I needed a conversation with you just to relive it before it just completely got wiped from my memory.
Yeah, no, same. And it feels like it was a while ago, but that was like November 16th and 17th. When we announced it sometime like in mid-October, it sold out in like a little over 24 hours, which I was like honestly shocked. I was talking to Katie about it, who's my podcast manager. Shout out to Katie Halligan. She's the best. We were like, I wanted to make it affordable enough for anybody could travel to LA, because we had probably half the group was out of state. Obviously, it being at Ableton's headquarters was like a huge draw for people just wanting to be there, and such a cool space, a lot of good energy in that office, a lot of good people working at the headquarters in the US. I was like, I hope we can get at least like 10 people to come.
What was your thought process? Because I think you created this unbelievable offer, is the way I saw it. It just felt like, who could resist coming to this weekend retreat?
I mean, like we talked about it, and I tried to like add up the numbers. It's like, how could we at least break even on this event? How could I get like some of the best OG Ableton teachers, producers, artists out there to come and teach? In a perfect world, I would have just had like all 170 guests from the podcast show up. That would have been awesome, but kind of unrealistic.
They were sort of here through the AI bot.
That's true. Yeah, we did have Abe, the Ableton AI chatbot that me and a really smart guy made. And we had like a fun like show and tell and had people ask questions and try to break it. But yeah, man, I would love to do it again, maybe next year in 2025.
Do people even like need context? Did you announce this to your podcast listeners? Was this
I did. Yes.
Okay. Because this disappeared so fast. I think it sold out the first day.
A little over 24 hours. Yeah.
Okay.
Would love to do it again. I mean, we had shout out to some real OGs presenters that came out, and
I'm looking at the lineup. It's like Rob Levere, Homemade Spaceship, Robert Trusco, Dan Giffen, Yuta Benatar, Sidebrain, who did
Copycat,
Copycat, Jonathan Stein, Chuck Sutton, and who did mixing and mastering?
Rince, my friend Christian Rince.
Christian, yes.
They're all insanely good at what they do in their own right. Anybody listening, you can go to YouTube right now. Just go to Live Producers Online or check the link in the show notes for this episode. And you can go watch all the full presentations. It's public now on YouTube. So you can watch everybody's like hour-long presentation, and like, man, there was so many wisdom bombs dropped in there. Like Chuck Sutton just nerded out so hard, like he always does. I kind of got lost a little bit as he was sharing all the details in his racks, but it was insane. And Yuta Benatar showed like tons of production workflows and hacks, and he made the entire room follow along with him without touching their mouse, and navigating through the mini clips and like working in live without touching their mouse at all. And like, I didn't even realize some of the stuff that you could do that he was showing us. So there's some really good like golden nuggets in those videos for anybody who wants to go binge them.
You obviously put a lot of thought into the event. Did it just casually happen to fall in that order, or did you put some thought into the order of the presenters? Because I felt like they stacked on each other really well when, you know, somebody would tee up a concept and introduce it, and the group would assimilate it and put it into practice, maybe take a break, come in, learn something different. And then by the end of the day, that concept from the first two presentations got really solidified by the end with a third presenter. I don't know if that was the nature of everybody being in the room, because that was another thing behind the scenes. All the presenters stuck around to hang out and enjoy the other presenters, because you really did create an awesome energy where everybody was welcome. Not only that, but we were interested in sticking around.
Oh, well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I'm glad nobody left in the middle of the event. That's good to know. I mean, like it was a lot of organized chaos, but it ended up just kind of as a happy accident in some regards. But yeah, each person presented for like an hour, and then we had a break in between. We also did track feedback. I purchased a couple different like headphone mixers for really cheap on Amazon. And then we could have like everybody had their own headphone mix where they could listen to a track on a laptop and give feedback to each other of like, hey, maybe you should try this or this. So everybody that attended got like personal one-on-one feedback with several of the presenters. I also wanted to mention for people that didn't know this, because a lot of people were surprised, if anybody goes to LA and you're in the Pasadena, North Hollywood area, definitely swing by Ableton's headquarters. You can go online, right? And you can schedule a time to go to the showroom. So people can come to the headquarters and go to the showroom if they want to play with Move or like the Push 3, or just kind of get to know some of the products. Like, you guys have a really cool setup for that where somebody can demo the products if they haven't played with any of the gear yet.
Thanks for sharing, Dan. And I'll send a link if you don't mind sharing it with the show notes for folks that are in the area. We're trying a little experiment. That's the whole reason I've been in LA since September. We set up this learning lounge where I'm talking to you from, and a showroom. And it's all part of a larger project called Ableton Spaces, where we're opening up these two rooms to people like yourself to create compelling, engaging, awesome experiences to your community. The showroom component is a place where people can come try our instruments. It's just such an important part of the a decision-making process if you're interested or curious about using Push. And it really happens in stages. I think like people's awareness of Push is limited to it being a controller. And a big passion project of mine right now is sharing how people like Chuck Sutton at your workshop use it like an actual instrument. And as a matter of fact, it was Chuck that gave me a really inspirational Chuckism. Then every time I talk to him, there's always like 5 takeaways. I'm like, what a genius.
For sure.
But he was talking about how when he saw Move and Push as just controllers, or saw Move as a mini Push, that he was limiting himself and the way he interacted with his ideas to that. And when he let that go and just started seeing it as an instrument with its own parameters and ways of approaching music, it really opened up the creative process. And you saw him express himself through Push and Move, and it's not unlike watching somebody play the drums, bass, or guitar.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have my Push 3 now, and this thing is like so fun. I was just like watching football and then like had headphones on, just jamming on my couch, which I would just do with my guitar anyway. And so having that standalone option, I think, is a huge part of that for me personally, where I can just sit and I could plug in anywhere, or just jam out. I could take it up to the mountains near my house if I want to, and just like sit on a cliffside and just make music, not have to worry about a laptop. Like that instrument standalone component, I think is really what sets it apart from a lot of other controllers too. As instruments, whatever.
Yeah, and as you can see behind me, we've got pushes on every desk. So when your class came in or your retreat, and we've had groups like We Make Noise and certified trainers like Yuta and Sanaya doing workshops here. We've had people like Minnie Bear come in and Jamie Blake do different community events and workshop events. And it's really cool to see how people get into making music when the computer's not the main focus, when they're following along, but they're not so obsessed on the screen. I think when you're following somebody's screen and then looking back at your screen and trying to get things to match, there's a little bit of a disconnect. Whereas if you're just, pushing a few pads, twisting encoders, and creating your sounds together, it can be a really powerful experience. And then I noticed a really interesting thing in your workshop. People are treating it like a notebook. I like to doodle or just randomly draw when I'm in class. It just helps me kind of keep it interesting. And I felt like people were using Push that way, where they were listening to the class, but at the same time, they were doing a little bit of encoder turning and sound design just to like do two things at once.
Or they were just really bored with my presentation and they just wanted
It was actually just during yours. Like all the other ones,
just only
everybody
mine.
was really attentive. Yeah. But back to spaces. So yeah, it was great to see you utilize all of it, because we do have this learning lounge. You were using the studio upstairs for listening sessions and feedback sessions. And then we just had the showroom open in case people wanted to come try Move, for example, which is, both Push and Move, they aren't at your local music shop. And when you want to make a decision about exploring an instrument, sometimes it's really valuable to be able to put your hands on it. So we have these sessions at the Learning Lounge, and at the showroom, where people can come and just schedule a try Move session or a try Push session. And somebody from our team's there to help them understand it. And then we're giving them just some time to explore and make some music on their own. They can ask questions. There's also a component where we're doing mini classes where people can come in and learn in a small group around an instrument too.
Yeah, that's so cool. And people are just I think interested to go see what the headquarters looks like for Ableton. And just being at the Mecca itself is kind of nice for some people just to have that experience.
It is. Personally, I remember going to Berlin and coming to Pasadena for the first time. The first time I went to Berlin, I just stood in the cold and took a selfie next to an office sign, a very basic, just industrial park office sign. Yeah. But that felt like I got to this place that was really important to me, where the point of origin of something that I felt very passionate about. And then later being hosted by the great Dennis Fisher, who in the Berlin office, and given a little tour, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, So I don't take that lightly. And when people come to the office, I really like extending some Ableton hospitality, showing them around, giving them a little tour, giving them an opportunity to interact with the instruments and meet people that help get them to the musicians' hands that they end up at eventually.
I also love downtown Pasadena. It's a cute place. It's just
that is the word. It's a very cute place.
It's cute. Yeah. I don't know how else to describe it, but and the parking's not too crazy, which is, another thing, but it's also hard to find the front entrance because it's kind of tucked in the back of a restaurant. So
we did a really good job for many, many years of having this office operate in secret. It was just an Ableton office where we had our support team, our marketing team, operations, and everybody in between. And during the pandemic, everybody started working from home and dispersing. So we had to reinvent what we did with the extra space. And so Tony McCall and I have been working on, who you met, great guy, have been working on these Ableton Spaces experiences. And shout out and kudos to him for not only having the initial idea of what this could potentially become, but then also trusting me and letting me sort of take the reins and take it to where it is right now.
Yeah, well, he did a good job trusting you with that because you're crushing it, and you're just an overall awesome guy and super smart, and I've loved seeing you present in the past as well. Everybody that works at Ableton that I've met are just really good people, overall. And I'm not just saying that because I have a podcast based around Ableton and its products, but everybody at the office that I met in Pasadena just like genuinely care about the products. They genuinely love music and the community behind it and just really want to make it the best atmosphere as possible and the best products. And they're very passionate about what they do. It was pretty obvious. Tony included. Shout out to Tony, the head of U.S. operations. Got to finally meet him after hearing about him for so many years, and super nice guy, very smart, and you could tell he's really passionate about the company and products as well.
Yeah, it's the result of working for a mission-driven company. When these values and these ideals are at the forefront of the decision-making process, you really do end up working with people that resonate with that. So everybody here is looking out for the best interest of our musicians, our users, our people that are even like curious about Ableton, and making sure that everybody has access to our instruments and our DAW, and that people can have these positive experiences.
The whole culture there is very welcoming, and it shows. And I think that's why Ableton's been so successful too. There's like a really strong community around the product. Like I feel like if I wear this Ableton hat that you gave me, which I love and it fits my head perfectly, by the way. So thanks for the dad hat. I always love free dad hats. But
we modeled it after your head.
Oh, did you? That's wonderful. Yeah. Honestly,
we've got AIR of our own too, Dan.
I was gonna say I'm actually a little concerned at how you could model my head remotely. That seems like a breach of like personal information. That anywhere I go and I wear like this hat or whatever, instantly it's like family. If somebody sees me, you're like, "Yo, Ableton, blah blah blah," and just like instant hugs. I don't see that as much with like other DAWs necessarily.
That's the best. It reminded me instantly. I was walking back home in Austin. Downtown, I was having a shitty day, and I was trying to get to a thing that was just like an obligation, right? And I'm just steamrolling downtown, down the sidewalk, and there's like somebody that works at a restaurant smoking a cigarette in the sidewalk. He's like, "Hey, Ableton," and I completely forgot I was wearing my T-shirt, and it just interrupted my shitty day in the best way because I got to have a 15-minute sidewalk conversation about, I don't know, like sidechain compression or something. Something workflow related with a total stranger. And that was that acceptance that I felt. It wasn't about me. It was that we had something in common, and it was music, and it was the approach to making music that I think this community shares. Taking a little bit of a tangent back to your event, it was interesting seeing your take on it, because the real power of this learning lounge is when people like you take it over, and it has the Ableton quality that people expect from an Ableton event. But at the same time, it had your flavor. And I think that combination was a good match. I think it was a good collaboration between Ableton and Dan Giffen, in the sense that I hope you didn't feel like your voice was lost in the whole Ableton of it all, because it felt to me like very like a personalized experience from you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it was cool, man. It was like, I don't know, when you're grinding on a project day after day, week after week, and you put like thousands of hours into something like I have with this podcast, and then you go to an event like this and you meet people who are like, "I've listened to every single episode you've released." And I'm like, really? Like, honestly, kind of takes you back, and like was surprising to me of being like, oh, there still are like a lot of real people out there who actually listen to this. It's not just like an Instagram DM of some arbitrary person on the internet. It's like actual real people. And being able to have that camaraderie, I think, with people in person, getting to get feedback from people, like asking them, like, who would you want on the podcast? Like, what did you like? What haven't you liked? What could I be doing better? Like, that feedback was super valuable too. And everybody that showed up, like, there's some hella talented people that came, and we all shared our music and tracks together as a group. And a lot of the people that shared, I was like, damn, this is really good. Like, you guys are crushing it, and they're like some of them were just getting started too. They've only been producing a couple of years. I was like, yeah, you got a bright future. Just like keep going. So I think the camaraderie of like, and the energy of everybody being there together at the Ableton Mecca, and just being able to share and nerd out together, just a bunch of nerds just going hard with like different tips and tricks and things, was like honestly a super cool event. I came back and I was completely fried and brain dead, but it was totally worth it. And I would gladly do it again, just for the community aspect. And I learned a lot from the event as well. As I think hopefully other people did as well. But yeah, we had a huge after party at an Airbnb. A lot of the budget from the tickets went to the after party, which I think like is just as important as the nerding out and the tech stuff that we did in the workshops, like just being able to have a good hang. We got some real legends like Cole, who used to do the artist relations for Ableton. And it came out, it was really good to see him again. And a lot of really incredible people showed up. So yeah, it was really fun to have that community aspect. We had
Two Lot come up too.
Two Lot was there. We went to their after party right before the workshop started. That was really fun. Isn't that Drake's Club? I think that was Drake's Club that we went to.
It felt like it could be Drake's Club.
For sure. It had Drake Club vibes, like the secret room upstairs and seeing people mysteriously behind the curtains with like white powder on their face.
I don't know if I'm getting old, but other people corroborated this. At one point, it felt like a school bus full of children got emptied out into that club and just like tiny people in club clothes.
Yes.
Like in the dozens just poured in.
Well, I didn't realize it was a private party, and I'm hanging out with like Copycat and Christian Rents, and this is the day before the workshop started, and we're at this like Drake Club, and then Robert Trusco, his band Two Lot, they were performing, and it was really cool. They had like a classic CDJ set up at this like really nice fancy club, and it was open bar, so we got like a couple drinks. And we didn't realize that when they finished playing that the private party was over, and then they were letting in the actual people coming to the club. And so we just noticed the atmosphere started changing really fast, and we're like just showing up ready for some like ghetto booty shaking like times. It was like it was a very distinctive shift. And I remember going up to the bar, and I was like, hey, we should get one more drink before we leave. And so we ordered like one little shot of Tito's, and it was like $65 or something. We're like, and I was like, and we just kind of looked around, and I was like, okay, I think open bar is over, obviously. And so he turned his head, and we just like ran. We just left.
Shout out Jules Jensen was also there.
Yeah, shout out to Jules. He's been crushing it. He's been on the podcast. I think he's going to be on the podcast again with Honeycomb in early 2025. And he's done a lot of stage tech and playback for Machine Gun Kelly. I don't even know, so many people. But he's an absolute wizard.
Yeah, absolutely the word I was going to use.
Yeah, he's brilliant with any kind of live performance tech. And we nerded out pretty hard when he was on the last episode.
Speaking of nerding out, I'm going to say this. I feel like, I don't know if I'm the only listener of your podcast that feels like it's, wanting to know behind the scenes, the real Dan Giffen, which I've been like, we're friends off pod, and we've hung out. We've been on mini road trips before and stuff like that. But it was cool seeing you with, like, for example, Christian Rents, who's like an old friend of yours, and you guys have a history. I've met a couple of people from your life, and just seeing you interact with people like that, meeting some of the people behind the scenes, meeting some people that I'd heard on the podcast. I don't know if I was the only one. Did you get feedback from attendees just like appreciating seeing the like behind the scenes for Dan, which you're exactly the same for the listeners. Dan is like so genuine. He is the version you get on this podcast in real life.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Feel free to invoice me for saying all these nice things.
I will. I definitely will.
I don't know. I like to think that I'm pretty much the same no matter who I'm with. I really struggle with the whole imposter syndrome thing. For me, like when I have events like this where I meet people off camera who are like, hey, you're Dan or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, we all sit and poop the same way. Like, I don't see.
That's what he says, everybody. By the way, people listening, the moment you meet Dan in person, he reminds you how we all sit and poo the same way.
It's an important fact. I don't know. So yeah, it was very encouraging for me, this event, of realizing like, yeah, all those years of hard work kind of pays off. And I think that's true, not just for my podcast or for me, but for anybody who's been grinding on their music or their art of any kind for years. Honestly, sometimes it just takes time to actually get to the place where you start to see some results, and it's like easy to forget that in the moment when you're in the process of just putting in hours and hours and hours and like you don't see it right away. So I guess anybody listening, I would just encourage you, from my own personal experience and my limited success, is like, definitely don't give up on continuing to grind. Because as long as you're being smart about it and you're putting in that time and the effort and putting yourself out there, like it just takes time. Eventually somebody's going to see it or listen, or you'll get connected somehow in some social circle if you put yourself out there. Like, I think it just takes time for anything. There's really no I don't think there's any cheat code in life just to get quick success. And it does happen sometimes on rare occasions to certain people, but generally that's not real. It does take a lot of work, I feel like, to make anything great.
Yeah. And, that's part of the coming back to Ableton Spaces as a concept. A lot of our friends and colleagues have put a lot of work into creating these communities, businesses, careers, whatever you want to call them, over the last 4 years. And a lot of it was in a digital format over Zoom or your Patreon, on a podcast. And they've gone really deep. I think that, people like you have built something, and there's people that have been attracted to what you're building. And same goes for a lot of certified trainers, a lot of musicians. For me, it's exciting to be able to bridge the virtual experience with a physical in-person event. That's why it was so important for me to get everybody to clap for you at the end. Like I totally took over, and I was like, guys, nobody's leaving here until we clap just long enough to make Dan blush a little bit, and then we'll stop. We don't want to torture him.
Well,
because it was important for me for you to feel the love, man, because I've been a fan of your work for a while, and I feel like it must be, I've worked, over virtual channels before, and it can be really lonely and alienating. And sometimes, you just get feedback on things you need to perfect and do better, and you're constantly trying to figure out your workflow and make space to be a musician and an artist. And I think this is part of your art. Like, I know making music is a very specific type of art, but connecting people, sharing knowledge is artful, and you do it in an artful way. So it's important for me, for when people come, that it's not just a workshop, that it's an opportunity for them to connect with their community and vice versa, because you all need to recharge your batteries too. It's like a lot of giving, and there's never, when you play a music show, there's at least applause or something. There's energy exchange, and I feel that as teaching musicians or teaching producers, it's beneficial to have that in some part of your daily mix or your yearly mix.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. If you noticed, I turned the applause right back on you when you did that at the event. I was like, thanks, guys. I feel uncomfortable. Let's give it up for Alberto.
But I'm uncomfortable just remembering it. Yeah.
No, that was really fun. Well, I mean, something just to say about you too is, I mean, you've been on the podcast. I recommend people go listen to your podcast episode that we did not too long ago as well, if they want to get to know you better, because we talked a lot about your success and your history and work. But something just is a funny story that happened during the event that I think it's worth sharing. Is it just speaks to who you are as a person. Is like, and you know what I'm about to say, but like, it was the first day and we were about to go out to lunch. It was just you, me, and a handful of the people presenting. I close up the whole room and everything. We're walking out of Ableton's headquarters, and there's this old sweet lady who comes up to you, and she's saying something, and I'm not sure. And you're like, hey, I'll meet up with you guys at the restaurant. And I was like, I was like, my brain was all over the place. I was like, cool, fine, whatever. So we get there, we're sitting down, we order food. And then I realized halfway through the meal, I was like, I don't think Alberto's coming. Like, where is he? And I asked somebody at the table, and they're like, oh, that older sweet lady, he's at her house right now, helping her with her internet. He's helping her with her Wi-Fi right now. I was like, did he know her? Like, is it his grandma? Like, how do they know each other? Like, we don't know. I think she just randomly walked off the street and just asked him, hey, can you help me at my house, which is down the street? And he just was like, without thinking about it, he's like, sure, let me go help you. Walk into a stranger's house, set up your Wi-Fi. And that's the kind of person you are. And so shout out to you. I thought that was hilarious. And I was like, also made me feel like a bad person, because I for sure probably would have said no in that moment. So like,
shout out to Innie. That was her name, Innie.
Shout out to her.
Very interesting person. The most complicated internet or tech setup. She's a photographer. I, wrongfully assumed that because she was an older person that was having trouble with their Wi-Fi, that it was just going to be a Wi-Fi password or a modem reset or something. I show up and she's got so many routers, so many hard drives. It's a snake of cables. I ended up sending you guys a picture at lunch when I realized I wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
And it became a running joke.
Yeah, I know. I remember asking you, like, at the end of the event, I was like, hey, if I have problems with my Wi-Fi, will you fly to Denver and help me like fix it?
Anytime.
Thanks.
That's me on a good day, like, to be realistic. And I felt I was in such a good mood from your workshop, and I've something about that lady situation pulled at my heartstrings. There used to be a computer repair shop in this building, and maybe twice a week we'll get people coming up with their iMacs or
Oh, really?
something that's broken, and realizing that place has been closed for like 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So something about her energy, and I'm glad I did, because it ended up being that she had some limitations and things that she was trying to work around, that I was happy that I followed my intuition on that one.
Yeah.
I won't do it for everybody, but yeah, something. Please don't send any tech requests my way.
Yeah, I'll include Alberto's email in the show notes. If anybody has internet problems, you guys can just hit him up. Just hit him up. He'll be your personal IT assistant. No, but I think that was very noble, and that was super nice of you to do that for her. Yeah, there was a lot of other things in the event that were curveballs. Katie, my podcast manager, who was going to help with a lot of the logistics, got COVID, and I found out when I landed.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I guess she's not doing anything this weekend. I guess I'll be doing all that.
We did have the story I need you to tell, and we can like omit any names, or you can mention whatever happened. But for the party, you intended to rent a DJ setup.
Honestly, I feel like it's something you would see in a TV show. Like just the series of events that happen. I was like, there's no way. This has to be a simulation that we're living in. Like it was just one thing after another. So there's a very, very, very popular center or how else could I say it? A very popular music shop in every big city in the country. And the one near Pasadena, I called in advance and I was like, hey, we're having this after party. I want to rent CDJs and a PA setup. Like, yeah, sure. Come on and pick it up. It'll be fine. We got it ready for you. Cool. So I get there and find out it's going to cost a lot more for the CDJs just to rent it for an extra day. And we were only going to do it for one night. So I was like, cool, I'll just take the speakers now. I'll come back CDJs later. Sick. Give us the speakers. We take them home to our Airbnb, which is like 25 minutes away. And we plug everything in. Speakers are blown. They sounded like absolute garbage. I was like, okay, well, we'll take this back tomorrow. Thankfully, we had 2 days before the after party. So we take it back the next day at the very end of the workshop day. We get there, massive line. There's like one person working there and there's this huge line. So we're there for an hour and a half. And Andre's like, he goes to the computer. There's like an Ableton setup. There's a computer with like tiny little speakers and he's just making a beat for like an hour and a half, like using Ableton on the store. We actually ended up leaving him because we forgot because he was over there just like playing and making music. We had to go back and get him.
Andre's got such calm energy too. Like not that he's forgettable. He's a very memorable person because he's so cool.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I can see him just sneaking off and making music and just everybody's in a rush to get out.
Yeah. Anyway, so we were there for an hour and a half, finally end up swapping out the speakers and we go to get CDJs. It was like, hey, I called again for like the third time. I'm here to get the CDJs. And they're like, oh, they got stolen. I was like, what? They're like, yeah, our CDJs got stolen. We don't have any here. I was like, well, where's the nearest store? Turns out me and the guys that I flew there with presenting, we were looking at a Instagram reel that was going viral, and you could probably find it if you look it up. And it was a store of the same chain that flooded. And they're like, yeah, that's the closest store that rents CDJs. You're gonna have to drive like over an hour to get some from a different store across LA. And I'm like,
and flooded means like you're talking about like the pools falling from the acoustic ceiling, like the fake drop ceiling.
Yes, there was over 1.5 feet of like standing water, just destroying all their inventory. And it's like, so that shop's closed, and that was the nearest one where you could rent CDJs from this store without driving an hour. And I'm like, okay, awesome. So last minute, there's like I could keep going with all the stories, but we ended up finally just buying CDJs. We just bought the XDJ XZ, which I already have at home, which I didn't need.
But you bought at least they were brand new, right, Dan?
No, they weren't brand new. So I bought it and I was like, okay, well, we got new CDJs. This will work great. And we get back to our place, no power cord in the box. And they were used. There was like greasy hand smudges. It looks like somebody sneezed on them like 5 times and then smeared it. And we're like, oh, this is awesome. So I just bought these new disgusting used CDJs. I was like, I'm not keeping these. I'm going to return them. So we used them and then we returned them the next day, which I don't recommend, by the way, to anybody. And as we're standing in line, there was like 2 other guys returning CDJs as well that did the same thing. And they just look at us and they're like, "Oh, did you do like the buy and return thing?" I was like, "No, these actually were used and disgusting," which is probably you were probably the person that did it. It was like one thing after the other. But anyway, all that to say, yeah, I could write like a chronicles of like Ableton Pasadena retreat from all the things like that. But it worked out.
Did you return that the last day before coming back to the office?
Yes, we did.
Well, because then that must have been a really long morning for you. Because the last thing I saw when I said bye to you, you gave me this huge plastic garbage bag, and it was full of booze.
Yeah, that was like my way of giving back to the Ableton headquarters office. It's a giant trash bag of alcohol because we had an after party for the event when it was over, and it was a BYOB, and everybody just like brought enough for like 3 people, and there was probably, I don't know what, 25, 30 people there. And so we had a lot left over, and we're like all about to fly back to Denver. It's like, I can't bring this much alcohol with us, and we're at an Airbnb. So we're just like, here you go. So we just dropped off a trash bag of beer on the way out to you. That was fun.
Oh, that reminds me, there was a bottle of wine there that had a funny story too, that I ended up taking to a Friendsgiving. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. Yeah, I hope you liked it. Was it good? I never tried it. Good. I hope so. So I stayed at my friend. Shout out to Evan. He works at Wasserman Music, and he's become a really good friend. And he's like one of the nicest people ever. And we went to bingo night the first night I flew in, and I won bingo 4 times in a row. And it wasn't like just a couple of us. There was like probably 25 people there playing bingo at this nice winery. And I won 4 times. And like after the second time, like people were still kind of clapping, but they're like, okay, everybody cheers when somebody wins or whatever. And at the third time I won in a row, people were like booing me. They're like, check his card. This guy's cheating. Like they're like mad, like throwing stuff at me. And then I win again for the 4th time, and everybody's just like pissed off. And I'm getting like a nice bottle of wine and like other gifts. It was hilarious. I made a lot of enemies that night at bingo. I gave you that bottle that I won because I couldn't take it with me. So I'm glad it was good. That was a good indication it was going to be a good trip when you win bingo 4 times. I probably should have bought a lottery ticket that night, honestly.
Yeah, but then you would have spent all your luck on becoming a millionaire, not on having an awesome workshop.
But imagine how many push 3s I could have bought. I mean, that would have been amazing. If I won the lottery, I could buy a lot of pushes.
Man, speaking of push 3, it was cool seeing Robert Trusco come here too. I've been working with him, or just like interfacing with him a lot in this role in Texas. And it was cool seeing him come, and he picked up a move while he was here. And so nice. I had to set him up with a push and a move, and I set him up with the PA upstairs, and he was just jamming. Like the balcony doors were open. Yeah. And it was just like pouring hot, sweet jams into the Pasadena alleyway. It was awesome.
Yeah. Should have got him a tip jar for people down below. He's honest. He's insanely talented, man. Yeah. He is a classic example of a person who can play pretty much every instrument really well. And he'll tell you that he can't play piano or whatever, but he's completely lying. He's just insanely talented. We recorded a track and released a track called The Drive together. And we went to a recording studio that Rob actually engineered. He was presenting Homemade Spaceship. That was like his first Pro Tools session he ever engineered at KMG Studios when it was open. Really nice. It was a really nice place. And there was a Hammond organ, and he's like, I've never really played an organ or a Hammond before. And he jumps on there and he just starts shredding, like just crazy, like hands and feet, just like going crazy. And I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I would have thought you've been playing this for years. But he's the most humble, nicest guy. I love Robert Trusco. If anybody wants to go check out his video on how to use the Push 3, whether you have one or not, he does a good deep dive and step-by-step into his workflow of how he just like starts producing from scratch using that thing. And I'll probably go back and rewatch it again too, because he had a lot of good tips and tricks.
Yeah, and also seeing Jonathan Stein, who's a phenom.
Yes, of course.
And so what it really helped me understand is that, again, confirming the idea that this is an instrument, not a controller, because each of them sounded and played and moved and interacted with it completely differently. Like
Yes.
the Tresco reminds me of a bass player. Like I feel like he turns the push into a fretboard. And he even gave me the tip of using my left hand because that's your fret hand. You're on your guitar neck. And it felt awkward at first, but it does offer this interesting muscle memory and dexterity of playing in fourths. Then seeing Jonathan, like I don't know, Jonathan's like really, he was like interacting with his own ideas in a really interesting way and like jamming with himself, creating a whole universe of sounds and then reining it into this one thing. And it was just different approaches to the same instrument. Even Chuck, like you see Chuck, and Chuck's very physical when he's playing his instrument. And seeing all three of them reminds me of a bass player. You know, everybody's got their own bass face when they're like really in the pocket, and everybody moves their body a unique way. So it really made me happy to see, or it made me happy to have people here to witness that with us together in a room. That it's, you know, once you see people using it back to back, you know, it's really easy. I've done push demos where I'm just launching clips or going through features, but to see these masters just like really set it on fire in front of you while explaining it and making it accessible was very humbling and exciting.
They make it look insanely easy, like just starting out, because they're just like avant-gardes of playing push and music. And yeah, Jonathan Stein, shout out to him. It was very different presentations on the same instrument. It was kind of a nice breakup too on the last day when I think some people's brains were starting to melt from all the information and everything they learned. And we just kind of got to watch him put on a show and explain what he was doing as he was doing it and just jamming. And yeah, it was really fun. It was a good time to see everybody's kind of own unique workflow.
That's why the Brittany mic comes in handy. The Brittany presenter mic that everybody was laughing. We have these like countrymen style mics for presenters, but that was a pet peeve of mine when we were designing the setup for this studio or the learning lounge. It's like a mix of a streaming studio, recording studio, and a live classroom. So that's why Dan was able to walk away with recordings. And if he had wanted to, he could have streamed the thing in real time too. Maybe next time. But having a microphone when you're presenting as an Ableton presenter is just adding, like you're juggling at that point. And then if you're doing a push presentation with a microphone, it's such a deterrent to getting in the flow. Even if it's on a mic stand, you kind of have to always move around and find the mic stand and come back to the push and center yourself. So we have this Countryman mic that's wireless. Everybody's reaction is the same. At first, it's like, ooh, fancy. And then they put it on and there's like a giggle because it's like so awkward to have this fuzzy thing on your face.
Yeah, it's like a McDonald's headset. It's like, do you want fries with that kind of like feeling? But I actually preferred it. And it was the whole setup you had in that room. Like, shout out to you and the Ableton team. I mean, not surprising at all. It's a very professional setup, what you guys did with that workshop room. And the Blackmagic ATEM Mini, I was already familiar with. If anybody's looking for a good video switcher for recording, I really like the Blackmagic ATEM Mini or the Pro ISO. Yeah.
How many times have you been to present somewhere and it's like too many connections or things aren't working or something, right? It's always something unforeseen. Yeah. And so we wanted to create a space here where it's plug and play so that if somebody has no experience with an ATEM, for example, they just set up, plug in their laptop to an HDMI output, headphone out of their laptop. There are 2 aux cables in case you want to connect a mixer or a push or an instrument, but it's ready to go. And all you have to do is press camera 1, camera 2, and you're done. You're switching between an overhead camera, a front-facing camera, and your screen. And we made it so that whatever people are seeing in the classroom is what happens in the stream and in the edit. But then because we're using the ISO ATEM, you can go back in DaVinci and make another edit with like a picture-in-picture or whatever you want.
Yeah, no, it was a great setup, man. Props to you. And I really appreciate you and the team and all the work that you put into making this a successful event. My only regret is I didn't get to try the Ableton 25-year-old birthday cake that you guys had.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Ableton turned 25 not long ago, and you had a big like 5-layer cake in the fridge that you showed me, but I never got to try it. It looked delicious.
It was so good. Shout out to Siggy for always, I feel like Siggy is the heart of this office and keeps it very human. And she got this cake for the celebration. I think the party might have been a couple of days before your workshop.
Mm.
And it was really fun. We were trying to do different things, and I came up with a game that I want to share with everybody out there in case anybody finds themselves during the holidays trying to kill some time. We got a bunch of us together. Everybody sort of knew how to use Move. Some people in our office, believe it or not, aren't musicians, and they have never they understand our products to a certain degree, but they haven't really gotten the chance or the experience of making music and what that feels like. So everybody that was interested would put their names in a jar, regardless of their experience level. We had 2 moves connected to a mixer. They were linked together. And then those 2 names that we would pull 2 names out of the jar, and those 2 people would do a set together for like, I would say like 7 to 10 minutes, but it could be more or less. It was just for fun. Yeah. And some wild stuff happened. Everybody was like really coming out of their shell. It felt like a cool team building experience, like a bonding experience, learning through music, no talking. People were dancing. People were like cheering each other on. And then it got even wilder when 2 other people from our team connected a mic to the mixer and just started singing pop acapellas on top of these like atonal beats and like other things that people were making. And it turned really fun. And I think that's the power of, to talk about Move for a little bit, where I think it's just that this instant access to creativity and to making music. I know when I use it, I stop thinking about a lot of things and I just interact with what's in front of me. And that lets me think of, or like connect more with what I'm hearing, what I'm creating, with what ideas are already there, as opposed to what else can I add? Let's build this chain. Let's like EQ this out. Let's start carving or shaping an LFO or an envelope, which is tons of fun and great. But if I make music like that all the time, it feels very overwhelming. It also feels like a lot of work music, where I always say the verb for music is play. And I think Move is I'm very partial, obviously, but I also see the potential of it on a daily basis. For example, Siggy, who bought that cake, had never made music, even though she's worked for Ableton for over a decade, I think. And she got paired up with Antoine, who you met, our colleague from France, who was visiting. Yeah. And they made house music together, and seeing her light up, like feeling of making music for the first time. But not only that, it sounded really good because you're using this instrument with built-in limitations, and those limitations are there to set you up for success, not to limit you. So it was also that whole week was filled with revelations about people interacting with our instruments from that party to your workshop.
That's cool. Yeah, I wish I would have had more time to play with Move, to be honest, because everybody that I saw or met that was playing with it, that was skeptical about it in the first place, ended up kind of coming away with being like, yeah, I could totally just like throw this in my book bag and like take it somewhere and jam. Like that's really what it's made for. I like what you said, the verb for music is play. I think that's a good reminder too, just not to overthink about like the process of having to sit down and do this proper session that's going to have to be completed, because a lot of times the inspiration can be drawn from just like sitting down with something like Move or even your phone and just making music on your phone or whatever. And just that can lead to other inspirations where maybe something else that is finished later. But I also like that Move had a microphone in it, which didn't sound too bad for as small of a mic as it is. It's great for sampling stuff.
Yeah. Chuck Sutton, Jamie Blake, and Claire Lim, Tony and I went to Sweetwater and we did some demos. Some people might have seen this video of the Fleetwood Mac song that we did. We covered it on Push, and it was a faithful cover with a twist at the end, and it was remixed. At the end, Austin Moss, a great person from Sweetwater, invited us to his house, and we were just having a couple of beers at his house around his dinner table. And we had promised him a personal walkthrough and like a tutorial. So we just pulled it out at the dinner table, and it became this hot potato. It felt like a game, but it also felt like we were really making music because incredible things were happening. So people were just like grabbing it from each other's hands, going like, "Ooh, I got this great idea," and just recording a pad and using the microphone to sample like a beer clank or a singing bowl. Yeah. We all hit, for one of them, we all hit a C in different octaves singing, and we recorded that, and it turned into this like 3-voice sample synth. That's cool. It was, nuts. And it all happened spontaneously, because not to get too like Rick Rubin-y or like the war of art.
Yeah, go for it.
But you do have to acknowledge that. Again, going back to play, it's this like Nobody wants to walk into a tense room, right? Like after an argument. I feel like if there is such a thing as the muse, you want to create a fun environment, right? I heard somebody, I think it was on the Rick Rubin podcast, say that the universe is playful with people who are ready to play back, kind of, or like play with it. I think when
Yeah.
we're like all serious, it's great, right? We're professionals. We want to be serious. We want to take this seriously. But when you take play seriously, I think it elevates your creativity and your relationship to the ideas to a new level, because again, there's that seriousness of following through, but the openness of letting them come in and creating an environment where these ideas feel welcome.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like Rob, Homemade Spaceship, talks about some of that in his presentation. He absolutely crushed it. Like,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to go watch a video from the event, I think a lot of us agreed that his was one of our favorites as far as like existential.
He set the tone perfectly. That's
He
why I was
did.
wondering about programming, because he like she shook everybody awake. He's got great energy. I had seen him present in Denver for a
Yeah.
user group, and became an instant fan of his approach, because he's like no nonsense,
Yeah.
but he's relatable and approachable, which is a very rare combination to find. And he really did shake everybody awake that morning with a lot of like, what are your excuses? But not in a accusatory way. It was more of a revelatory way. Like, realize that you are your own worst enemy. Here
Yep.
is how, and here's how to work around it.
Yeah, for sure. I like his analogy of like going fishing. Like when you're coming up with an idea, like embracing the process over perfection, because there's no such thing. And like he talks about like the fishing analogy of songwriting, even on a bad day, fishing where you don't catch anything, you still had a good time. And writing music is the same. Even if I don't make like an absolute banger or a song that I'm finishing, I had a good time doing it. Like I had fun just making an idea, whether it's finished or not, doesn't matter. Spending days creating music are infinitely more valuable than unproductive time spent on other like activities, like just staring at a screen watching Netflix or something. And talked about how like just being creative in that process. He went pretty deep. So anybody wanting to watch more, go watch the videos on YouTube.
Yeah, and seeing somebody like Rob, who's he's very involved with this DAW, like it's a big part of his expression, and it's like his instrument. Christian too, and seeing, not to be too pretentious about this space, but welcoming them to the mothership, to Ableton, where to home base, and giving them an opportunity to present. I don't know if they had done Ableton events. I know they'd done user groups, but it was really cool to get that you were able to reveal this talent of these presenters, and bring them to our awareness, because otherwise maybe they would have not ended up in Pasadena with an opportunity to talk at the office.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, as we were finishing off the event, I think everybody that presented expressed how grateful they were to be a part of presenting at Ableton's headquarters. And like I said, the energy was great. Like, shout out to anybody that attended. Thanks for coming out. It meant a lot to me that we had such a good crowd of people that were really into it.
We had somebody come from Canada. That was
the furthest. I think that was the furthest traveler. It was like way up in, I forget where they were from.
I think he said Ottawa.
Yeah, that's pretty far. Yeah, from LA. It was fun, man. It was really good. I'd be open to doing it again next year if you guys are still doing these workshops and stuff.
Yeah, so far it's been a positive, a well-received experiment, and I hope that this continues. You're always welcome back, and I'm happy to have that conversation. Get that phone call when you're ready.
No, I appreciate that. We got to get you out to Denver, though. It's your turn to come visit me now.
It is.
Yeah.
It's been long. It's long overdue.
It is. I agree. So yeah, just put it on the company card and just book a flight. Just come on out. Come visit.
Yeah, reason catching up with Dan.
Yeah, catching it. That's a good reason. I'll talk to Tony. I'll talk to Tony. He'll understand. Yeah. Awesome, man. Was there anything else that you wanted to share about the event recap, or just in general, whatever?
Man, if you let me, I just want to invite people, if they're in the Southern California, Pasadena area, whether they're here on vacation or they live here, we always have something interesting happening at the showroom. And occasionally there's, listings about stuff at the Learning Lounge. We are creating opportunities for people to interact with our instruments and learn about our instruments from people like Dan and other certified trainers and artists. I'll share the link with you. Right now, we're using this Acuity scheduling link because, again, it's a very like early stages experiment. It's abletoninc.as.me if anybody just wants to type it in right now, but I'll share that link with you. And I would love to welcome you to the office and show you around and give you an opportunity to explore our instruments and see how they inspire you.
And I know there was a special discount code for people that ended up attending the Pasadena event for our retreat. Is there any additional, like for people who book time at the office, are there any special offers or anything? Or is that like a kind of a seasonal?
It's actually a seasonal thing. It's something that, whenever there are Ableton discounts, those get passed on. So we had a Black Friday, Cyber Monday deal, and it was really cool to see this showroom experiment, which had consistently people had been trickling in. All of a sudden, with that offer from Black Friday, we were booked the entire week, and it was really cool having so many experiences with people interacting with instruments, having happy moments. People, with their significant other buying it as a gift or just supporting the purchase and seeing, that it is a very personal decision. And that's why a place like the showroom, in my opinion, is necessitated, because you want to make sure, you want to kick the tires, so to speak, and see what this thing's all about. Because when I saw Push, full confession, Push 3, I thought, oh, that looks just like Push 2. And it wasn't until I got it home and I put my hands on it that it really made sense. Yeah. And when I started seeing how these minor changes, or visually like apparently minor changes, made huge impacts in my workflow. And it wasn't from the lens of, look at this cool new redesign, now you can buy this new thing because it looks different, it's in a different color or form factor. I think they were really smart about saying, we built a great instrument with Push 1 and 2. People still play them to this day. I hear people go, I don't need a Push 3, I've got my Push 1. And that makes me very happy. We didn't want to, throw away that entire learning experience of people really using it like an instrument, developing this muscle memory, and all of a sudden, all right, now it's a circle or something, or a star shape, so you can spend more money. So again, it was a revelatory experience for me. And with Move, I've just heard a lot of people discard it as like, oh, it's just half a push, or it's a mini push, or it's like this combined with a that, or if this had a baby with that. And I get it, but it is a very unique, it's a unique workflow to Ableton, and it's a unique instrument, I think, in the ecosystem of instruments out there. That's why I would love to invite people to come try it out, have somebody from our team walk you through it, and just come, again, play with an instrument, no strings attached or obligation. We have try appointments and we have buy appointments, because this is the only place right now where somebody can come in and walk out with an instrument and not have to wait for it to get shipped. But most people come and try our instruments and just see what they're all about and if they're right for them.
No, I think it's a cool concept. And yeah, it makes sense, especially for something like a Push 3. It's not super cheap, but I think once you play with it, you start to understand why. And it's basically a computer in itself. And it's nice to be able to get your hands on one if you don't know somebody that already has one before you actually make a commitment to that. So I think it's a great idea.
I think a lot of people, if you see it as a controller, the price doesn't make sense. But when you see it as an expressive instrument, similar to a guitar or a piano, and then it's got an interface and it's got a display and it's got a hard drive and it's got Wi-Fi and it's got you can control your modular, you can control external instruments with like all these things. It feels like more justified when you start using it to its full extent.
Yeah, I mean, just even as an audio interface, you can run ADAT in and out of it as well, so you can expand the ins and outs. Like there's a lot to it. So yeah, I 100%
And this is a
agree.
great way for maybe people that are Ableton curious, right? A lot of what I encounter is people that are dedicated to a DAW. So they'll say like, I don't use Ableton instruments or the DAW because I'm a Pro Tools producer. And I think Move and Push are great ways for people to use the power of an Ableton workflow in our instruments, and then track it into Logic, track it into Pro Tools, using ADAT, using an interface. Because if you take an instrument to the studio, you're not worried about transferring files. If you take a Moog to a studio, you just record it. And when you start looking at Push and Move as instruments, then you can take them anywhere and have your ideas recorded in any studio around the world, including your own bedroom studio.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Trusco and I did when we were recording at that KMG into Pro Tools for tracking a bunch of live instruments. I mean, he downloaded the project that we had in live at my studio and then had all the sounds and everything ready to play out and recorded track into Pro Tools later at the studio. So, and it was just easy. We just ran like line out of the push into Pro Tools, and we had all of our sounds and our entire set already loaded on it. So we could track and record anything we wanted right there. So yeah, it makes sense. Alberto, always good seeing your face, man. Thanks for hanging out on the pod and asking me cool questions. Make sure everybody go check your stuff out too. And
yeah, I'm at Musical Guest on Instagram. That's a good place to find me. And yeah, come by the showroom. I'm usually here.
But yeah, man, thanks again. Always good seeing your face. We'll have you back on the pod sometime soon. Come visit Denver. We'll get you out here eventually. That's my goal.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, Katie.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll talk to you later. Hey, thanks for listening to the podcast. Do me a huge favor if you would and hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you're listening to the podcast. If you don't hate the podcast, please leave a 5-star review. It would help me out a ton. Don't forget to check back on Tuesdays for new episodes. If you want to be the first to get new episodes and stay updated and get free new devices and sample packs and other stuff that I'll be sending out in the future, join the newsletter. Just go to liveproducersonline.com/newsletter and or check out the links in the show notes. Make sure to give this guest a follow on the socials. Give them some love for spending their time. And once again, thanks for listening to the podcast. I will see you next time. Later.